Alright. Chapter 2, who wants to go first? Alright. I saw Andrew first here, so let's see. Alright, chapter 2. Alright, go ahead, Andy.
Okay, so I had why did cities decline? I had between 1950 and 2008, Detroit lost over 1 million people, 58% of its population. Today, 1/3 of its citizens live in poverty. Detroit's median family income was $33,000. About half of the U.S. is average. It's just crazy to see that, like in big cities, how kind of living in the outskirts, like they're barely surviving off of $33,000 a year. If you look at how expensive things are now with inflation.
Yeah.
$33,000 a year is pretty hard and it's almost impossible.
Yeah, 33,000. So depending on how big your household is, but poverty lives around 23 for a family of 4. I think roughly that changes each year, but somewhere in there. So yeah, not a lot. Okay, good, Jameson.
I'll add to his. Like I got a quote like with Buffalo, Cleveland, Detroit, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, St. Louis. All 6 of those big cities that a lot of the people know about have lost like half their population since 1950s. Like it's just crazy how those big cities like them lose so like of the population by just like working and all that.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. I got to add a special thing about Cleveland. So my son just moved to Cleveland last summer for his first job. And even though we told him, I advised him, son, have you looked at the demographics on crime and blah, 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 and like, Cleveland's not a good place to live, basically. Relative to Tennessee was their other thing. Well, long story short, they went to Cleveland. His fiance's working at Cleveland Clinic. And so then I went to visit Cleveland when he's there, and he just moved in, and turns out Cleveland's pretty nice. I mean, it's actually not too bad. Now, my expectations were down here, but, every city's got kind of bad parts of town or whatever, but in general, it was pretty nice. It's right off the lake. They got all the major amenities. One of the cool things that comes from these towns shrinking is no traffic problems. The freeway was built to hold 3 million people, and now it got cut in half. And so he gets to work nice and easy. You don't have to worry about traffic as much. And I think Cleveland has slowly started to grow as we've learned, some of these cities, can they turn around or not as we'll continue. But just thought I'd let you know that that was a pleasant surprise. And Cleveland's not too bad of a place to live overall. He's enjoying it just fine, hasn't got anything stolen big time or anything like that or been in danger yet. So, but any big city comes with those sorts of risks. So, okay, who wanted to go next? John.
I have a quote that says, these places, which is talking about those 6 big cities, have reinvented themselves by returning to their old pre-industrial roots of commerce, skills, and entrepreneurial innovation.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting since the industrial is what really built the cities. Now they have to switch back over if they want to keep all the people in.
Yeah. Some of that's kind of easier said than done. Okay, good. Anything else on this section? We can open it up to the Rust Belt. The next section, my God.
In the 1900s, all 20 of America's largest cities were on major waterways. And that the best way to move goods boats and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of cool because we don't think about that mode very much nowadays. Zeke?
Yeah, that in 1860 it cost as much to ship goods 3 miles of land than it did with those goods to cross the Atlantic.
Yeah.
I thought it was weird how much like, shipping was going down.
Yeah, that's cool. What page? Did you have a page number?
57.
What page?
57.
Oh, 57. You're kind of jumping ahead. So we'll try not to jump ahead to new sections. So I might, we'll circle back to you. So we'll try to we'll just try to plow through. It's okay if we wiggle a little bit, but we'll try to kind of talk through the sections of the book as we go through. Mackenzie?
Said how Detroit was a hub for waterborne commerce, and because of the location, that French mayor was able to control the river traffic there.
Mm-hmm.
So that made Detroit the ideal spot to cross water barriers between the U.S. and Canada for transporting.
Yeah, right at that pinch point. Bryce?
They talked about, because of like, how, important water travel was, it then went on to say between 1815 and 1900, Chicago experienced a 50-fold population increase from fewer than 30,000 to more than 1.5 million inhabitants as trains began to follow the waterways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people could travel along with it.
Yeah, big explosion. Okay, we can open up the next section. We can always go backwards too. So if you had something like, oh, I wanted to say something here. So Detroit before cars is the next section too. Jonathan?
The car was a new idea that combined two old ideas, the carriage and the engine. Both carriages and engines had long been made into which kind of just set things up for Detroit right away.
Right, so kind of related to that, yeah. Good.
Yeah,
Awesome.
kind of adding on to that, I thought it was cool, it was natural for the city to specialize in building ship engines before, and its expertise in building and repairing engines would make Detroit a natural place to build cars, which I thought it was kind of cool, and it kind of explains why the industry declined in Detroit, and curious what the next engine or new thing would have been that could have
Yeah.
helped it.
Yeah, it's kind of neat how he's showing the connectivity of these cities evolving and then that little bit of a head start with the engines, like you were saying. Andrew?
I have, in the 1930s, only the most full-heartedly involved finance businessmen with very big bunch of Willis came forward. I mean, like, how big of, like, businesses they were that
Yeah.
they would bury you, if you try to, like, sue them, they would just bury you in court fees before you'd be able to even take a note to court, and they were just so well-known and so popular at that time that trying to get anything else in the market was next to impossible.
Yeah, yeah. There's are you guys, I don't know if you're gonna, I think is it the Edison? The story of the Edison? Anybody familiar with that? Basically a car company that tried to start up but got some pushback and pressure from the bigs. Mary Lou used to assign it in one of her classes years ago, but anyway, so there are examples of small companies that start up and either the big guys would swallow them up, kind of similar to what we see today with Facebook buying, Instagram or whatever. Similar thing there, just with physical stuff instead of electronic. So, Mando, it's hard for me to always go around here. So, you do have a hand up. Look at that. Okay, go for it.
We're on the Detroit car, before cars, right?
Yes.
Okay, I was saying how the dry dock was incorporated in 1872, and this was Ford's first major exposure to technology, sophisticated engine project. And I thought that was interesting because of how he incorporated what he learned from the dry dock into him making automobiles.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, other people? We can move into Henry Ford too if we want to. Henry Ford and industrial Detroit. Julian?
I thought it was pretty cool and interesting how, this is River Round, he erected an 9-story building complex with 7 million square feet of workspace. It had its own docks, rail lines, and power plants with raw material that can turn into cars. It was in a single space, so I thought it was pretty cool. Even from company to company, we finally got that. I can do this tomorrow and have a whole bunch of land with all the production, factory production,
Yeah, good. Carlos?
Now that massive factories are getting put up in the city, and I really find interesting that to kind of explain why we have like managed and high skilled jobs like in the city, and why we have these massive production factories like ours.
Okay. Mackenzie?
I thought it was interesting too how how the plant process began suburbanizing manufacturing that would be used throughout the 20th century. So all that started from then, was still used out pretty much today. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Aaron?
I have the National Labor Relations Act passed in 1935. Made it difficult for them to fire striking workers and to form closed shops where unions and firms agreed that all workers in a given facility must strike.
Okay. So yeah, we start to see the strength of unions starting to form and different coalitions against the owners who they've already shown were starting to get kind of powerful too. Zeke?
I saw like before World War II, companies put up with high living costs in northern cities because the transport network made it so much easier to buy raw materials and ship on products, so they could put up with high prices because they're so cheap. That was where
section, why riots? Mando, is your hand up again, or is that still the old hand from before?
I think it's still the old hand from before.
Okay. I'll try to look over there, and, so take the hand away and then put it up when you're ready. Jacob?
I don't think should be three. Urban renewal in both Detroit and New York may have replaced unattractive slums with shiny new buildings, but did little to address urban decline. Those shiny new buildings were really cognitive villages spread throughout America, built to provide politicians with the appearance of urban success. A lot of politicians feel just coming closer to the 21st century, just want to show people that, hey, this is what I'm doing, but really they haven't really seen much to help out.
Good. Okay, other things, why riots? Carlos?
I just want to say that I see that don't generate human capital will decline eventually.
Human capital with the what?
Like a city that don't generate human capital will decline eventually.
Ah, okay, okay. Yeah, and so what does that mean to you in terms of human capital?
Like ideas and entrepreneurship. innovation.
Good, awesome.
I like, it says investing in building people, oh, that's all. He said, and he ended up preferring pay raises to strikes, this is talking about the pay raises in New York, and increasing costs of city government were then hidden in increasingly creative bookkeeping. I thought this is kind of nice of him to say creative because it led straight to your near bankruptcy in 1975. It's like, let him off easy there.
Yeah, yeah. Mando?
Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out how to stop the.
Oh, you have at the bottom of your screen, if you hover your thing, it says, there's like the little characters or emojis.
Yeah, the reaction?
The emojis are reactions, yeah. Hit the button for the hand and it should disappear. There you go.
Did it work?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we can open up the next urban reinvention, New York City since 1970, and let's just open up the righteous rage of Coleman Young. So we'll just kind of go. There's lots of littler sections as we go, so we can open up some of those with some other thoughts. Jameson?
So I have a thing, one of the city's failure was in many ways the legacy of more success. So to me, it's kind of ironic how what brought Detroit, like a lot of the people, in many ways, that's how it failed.
Okay, yep. Bryce?
I like what it said, the direct effect of Young's income tax was to take money from the rich to fund services that help the poor, but the indirect effect of the local income tax is to encourage richer citizens and businesses to leave.
Yes. Yeah, so the unintended consequence of they might find other places. That's what California and New York's finding out with their income tax, right? We talked about the migration to Florida and Texas and other places, Phoenix. Okay, other things in this one. These couple sections. The Curley effect, the edifice effect. Kind of open up a few different sections there. We found some interesting ones you want to comment on. Let's see, Gabe is not here. Oh, you are here. Okay, so then Tyler, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, that's the edifice complex. Detroit's construction project certainly changed the look of the city. The Renaissance Center dominates the skyline. I mean, on the people mover, it feels like a trip to Disney World. But Disney World is really in the middle of the rest of the city. It's just interesting to me how you talked about, and you kind of touched on that in class, how they didn't really need the people mover, and there was something that like it's cool to be there, but it's really sort of a huge burden because they have the roads that are in place.
Yeah, how much of the basics versus the frills. And Gabe, did you want to?
I had one for the Curley effect. It was the mobility of the prosperous limits the ability of any city government to play Robin Hood. The well-off can, with relative ease, walk away from the oppressed and declining city. Detroit's middle class escaped Young by moving to the suburbs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that that people think that we're hitting the person with the negative that's most easily has the resources to move, right? Whether that's moving overseas or moving to a different state or whatever. So we're trying to help that, but it's a fine line. People aren't as fixed in their space as people think. So it's like status quo or ceteris paribus. ceteris paribus, if you don't move and you stay there, and then we get into some of you who are in entrepreneurial economics with Atlas Shrugged, we just pass a law that says you can't move, right? And then how does that help us, right? It's like, oh, the problem is you're moving, rich people. I'm gonna force you to stay, and then the heavy-handed government just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, laying on things to try to plug loopholes with people's behavior. So ultimately, do we live in a free society, or do we have freedom, or don't we have freedom? Jonathan, did I see you?
Yeah, in the evidence complex, instead of trying to attract smarter, wealthy entrepreneurial people who build structures, how
Yeah.
do you attract those kind of people?
You know, what is, and these people, they're meaning entrepreneurs or business people, right? What are they trying to maximize? So what can I do to help the bottom line? You know, some of the things we do here in Ottawa, they're trying to build up the high schools, and I think they've done a nice job of trying to match business and high school graduate to say, I need some people doing this. If you have some kids that aren't thinking they want to go to college, man, if they graduated high school and they had some of these skills, that would be great, right? And so instead of building buildings, we build human capital to some degree. And so then, again, raising taxes might not be the right thing to attract the new business, because if they're maximizing profits and taxes are high, they'll go to the least taxed place. So that would be my shorthand thing, just kind of thinking about their process with profits and business. Aaron?
Also on that same thing, it talks about like the tendency of cities to think that they can rebuild themselves out of a decline or whatever, and it says that it's a fishy air or a flashy air.
You got a page number?
Page 62.
The tendency to think that the abundant new buildings leads to urban success.
Yeah.
So why would they want to rebuild all these buildings and basically their city decline? Kind of like the whole China thing with the ghost cities, right?
It's the whole build it and they will come type of concept, right? Well, I look at a successful city, they have big, nice buildings. If I make big, nice buildings, I will become them. But that's a lack of understanding of what was the root cause of those buildings. It might have been an environment that was very good for business. Businesses grew slowly over time, and it evolved into big, nice buildings and other nice things. And so you can't look at the physical thing and necessarily get, you know, your desired outcome. Okay, there's another hand. James.
In the same area I got, Proponent John, he spent like around like $630 million to keep like two sports teams, and today it would be around like $2 billion to keep it in.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just crazy how he spent that much money on two sports teams, and he could have done something like take like old houses down and refurbish it or something.
All right, let's just finish off the last chapter here. We've got remaining in the Rust Belt, shrinking to greatness. Shrinking to greatness is kind of the last section that kind of does some conclusion stuff. Jacob?
On page 63, I had, even before the recession hit in 2006, Detroit's unemployment rate was 13.7%, which is far higher than any other next largest state. I just thought it was crazy that the unemployment rate was that high.
Yeah. Mando, I wanted to come to you before these guys talk. I know it's hard for you to hear what they're saying, so we just had Jacob comment one thing, but I wanted to give you first dibs on the last section if you wanted to.
Thank you, I appreciate it. The shrinking to greatness, or the
Yeah.
I can give you the remaining to Rust Belt, or
Either one, if you got one.
okay. Well, when I was reading remaining in the Rust Belt, I was really intrigued by I put on the bullet bandit, the harsh reality of industrial decline and political failures meant that by 2008, Detroit's per capita income was $14,976, only 54.3% of the U.S. average. When I didn't really realize how much industries had on like people and their income coming into the, like in their life, you know what I mean? So it was really interesting to read about that.
Yeah. Just another quick thing related to my son moving to Cleveland. Guess where the lowest housing prices are in the nation? Cleveland. So that's another benefit of a shrinking city, that there's vacancies for apartments and for houses, and so he's got a pretty nice apartment for, I can't remember what it is, 650 or 800, I guess, but it includes like all the utilities, the heat in Cleveland, the snow, and he's got a covered parking deal, so that with all the snow they get in Cleveland, so, and housing prices are, I think they were the lowest in the nation in the metro, as far as metropolitan areas, so that's another benefit. I'm bringing some of these things up, by the way, because when we get into today's material, this chapter, we're gonna look at some of that, so this is all kind of tied together. Lawson?
That kind of what you're saying, the downside of cities kept alive through cheap housing is that they overwhelmingly attract for creating centers of extreme deprivation that cry out for social justice.
Yeah.
That kind of like hit it on the nail on my point, that they keep making these new houses and the housing prices are gonna go down, but like, it's just incentivizing people to move there. You're never gonna change the rate of poor people living there.
Yep. Let me go to Julian, Gabe, or McKenna, or Tyler. Any of you with something? Tyler?
I just thought it was interesting, this one, he's talking about that another way to bring back their cities to give businesses tax cuts. And then he talks about how it is proven that it works, but it took $100,000 in tax breaks to generate just one job, so it's not super effective, but it
Right. Yeah, cost benefit analysis, there's a
Yeah.
lot of data similar to that. That it's like, oh, we raised jobs. Yeah, great, you got one job, and you spent $100,000 to create a $40,000 job. Brilliant. Julian?
Like on the last page of the chapter, it was talking about declining places that have cheap housing, which attracts poor people due to the prices to live there. And it says there's nothing wrong with urban poverty. This is a sign of city success. Now, when it says something like that, is it like meaning like is it a sign of city's post success, or like in the sense of like the success that just happened? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let's kind of let you guys think about that one. Bryce?
One that I thought was interesting was it said over the last century, the variable has been a better predictor of urban growth than temperate winters. I just thought that was really interesting.
Then temperate winters, yeah.
How like nicer weather is.
With innovation and stuff. Yep.
Kind of made me think.
McKenna?
According to the Census Bureau, 86% of central city Detroit's housing stock was built before 1960. Average house in the city is valued at $82,000, which is far below the cost of it.
Wow, yeah, that's right. I think I had that was on the previous one, right? Yeah, okay. And that's similar to what Detroit found too. 86%. Wow. Before that. Good. So, Julian, back to your question. Is this in this last paragraph?
Yeah.
While poverty and urban failure often link people's minds, particularly because combining places attracts poor people with cheap housing, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with urban poverty. In fact, as we'll see in the next chapter, poverty is usually a sign of a city's success. So there's nothing intrinsically wrong with urban poverty. Well, that sounds like an academic that hasn't gone hungry for a while. I don't even know if I agree with that. It might be a little too strong there. I think just because I've read this book and I know where he was going with that, but there's nothing intrinsically wrong with urban poverty. Anybody want to chew on that one, or what he meant? What is it intrinsically wrong? There's nothing intrinsically wrong with urban poverty. Jonathan, is that you know?
I think he kind of meant that because there's poverty, it's attracting poor people to come and try to be successful.
Yeah.
Because the city overall is so successful that he thinks that the poor people are just gonna go there and trying to do it and then end up in poverty.
Okay. Anything to add, Jameson?
It's like the market is growing in the city.
Okay. A sign of positive potential market growing. Bryce, anything to add? So I was really picking on the word intrinsically wrong. You know, what is what's the intrinsic value of this $10 bill?
However much it's worth to you, whatever you buy with it.
The intrinsic value is different.
Maybe to ride or start a fire or something.
Smoke a joint, start a fire, right? There's intrinsic value to it being paper, but not much. It's not $10 worth of value, right? So That's the word I'm kind of struggling with here on, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with urban poverty, and I don't know. I think there are some things wrong with intrinsically wrong, but, necessarily wrong, I don't know. Carlos?
I was thinking that probably because for the cities and like rich people to get richer, they need like poor people to do like little jobs.
Okay, yeah, that's part of the attracting people who are poor. I think the intrinsic part for me is where were these poor people in the urban area that are now in urban poverty, where were they before? So if they were before in rural poverty, and rural poverty was worse than urban poverty, then even urban poverty has maybe higher intrinsic value than rural poverty because you actually are materially better off either in actual consumption or expected consumption or whatever because of the benefits of the city. I don't know, I'm just stretching, I'm really asking you guys, I don't have any right or wrong answer, but the intrinsic word is the one that kind of hit me that I'm not sure if I agree with it, because there's a problem of going hungry is still intrinsically a problem of poverty, and that still exists, and that's certainly not good. But, relative to maybe another worse position, I could buy into it. All right, any last comments or questions? All right, that's a wrap. Go back to your seats. So we'll have chapter 3 due Monday morning. So over the weekend, hit chapter 3 of that book. I don't think we did a problem from yesterday, did we, at the back of the chapter? So chapter 6 is what we wrapped up yesterday. And yeah, I wanted to do... So if you have your books with you, you can turn to number 2. I'll put it on the big screen here as well. Oh, I gotta spin you around, Mando, just a second. Okay, number 2. How many pizzerias? So your city initially restricts the number of pizzerias to 1. The existing monopoly sells 2,000 pizzas per day. The number of firms is N divided by big Q minus little q. So remember, big Q is the quantity of pizzas in Ottawa. Little q is the quantity of pizzas produced by Pizza Time, right? Or if there's 5 of them. So if on average there's 1,000 pizzas and then there's 100 here, 1,000 divided by 100 equals 10. So the number of firms would be 10. Where q is the market quantity and q is the quantity per firm. In the case of a monopoly, it equaled 1. So I'm just kind of showing you the work here. A pizzeria reaches the horizontal portion of its long-run average cost curve at an output level of 1,000. Suppose the city eliminates the entry restrictions and other firms enter the market. According to the economic consultant Difford QQ, the equilibrium number of pizzerias is not 2. Explain Difford's economic logic. Illustrate. Let you guys chew on that one for a while. You can talk with your neighbor if you want. So we start off with that. We've got an output level of 1,000. So we did do this the other day. So draw a long run average cost curve. would probably be a good start. When long-run average costs are falling, what do we call that? As the scale of economies of scale. So here we're saying long-run average costs, so we have economies of scale, and it's saying it bottoms out at 1,000. So it starts to hit horizontal, or the minimum point is at 1,000. I kind of swung this up here. It doesn't necessarily say that it swings up. It says that it hits the horizontal portion, so it might stay flat if we don't want to read too much into the question. But so maybe something like that. Long run average total cost. So according to the economic consultant, Difford QQ, the number of pizzerias is not 2. So they're telling you that apparently this Difford is an economic guru, and the answer's not 2, but explain why. The answer's not 2. We were at 2,000, remember, so if we add on to my graph here, I'm kind of going off with the monopoly, it was 2,000. Operating somewhere over here. This is the 1,000.
Is it because the smaller firm is, or the new firm, I guess, is going to produce or sell less because of their long-run average total cost is higher starting up?
I don't know. Talk to your buddies. Talk to your neighbors about your theories and conjectures. What do you think's going on? I've given you the most I'm going to give you right here. I'll add a little bit more that this is quantity, this is quantity, this is pizza. You might want to look back on your notes about monopolistic competition. Think about the pictures that we drew yesterday. Maybe I'll put some of them on here. We drew some pictures early on when we started this chapter 6. I think that was actually on Friday that we did some hand pictures, and then here's what we went over yesterday.
So whenever someone enters the market, the average cost curve shoots up.
Talk to your buddy.
It shifts up.
So the problem said it's not 2. The equilibrium number of
If you think
firms
about it,
is
that
not
cost
2.
curve, that's how he makes 2,000. But when you add it,
If
it's
you can use
each
what we've
firm
got up
after
here to
working with it, harder to produce more. The
why
average
it
cost is
wouldn't
only
be
up.
2.
So it can't be 2 because only one firm would be able to produce 2,000. 2 firms could probably produce 750 each or something because the
I'll
cost.
give you a hint. The answer is staring you in the face on the screen.
Staring us in the face.
Yeah.
Staring deeply into your eyes.
Okay, it can't be the one just because there's no problem.
Remember, this was the monopoly model, and this was the long-run monopolistic competition model.
But I thought you wanted to shut off this like on the last one.
But like if you hit the gap, like at 0.8, it's like
Okay, so from the picture I gave you, start drawing some demand curve. Make the picture start to look like what I got over there, or what we had yesterday over there. Just kind of play around, don't be afraid. Hopefully you got a pencil like Julian does, so you can erase it if you screw it up. But just try to visualize, why is there not 2 firms under the conditions that were given in the problem? Which is what I have drawn in blue up there currently. Draw a demand curve. I don't care where, just draw one, any old one. Okay, that's good. I'll get your brain thinking. I want to see a demand curve on some papers. See some demand curves. Looks like from what just walking around the room, most of you drew your demand curve somewhere above the arc. Which is fine. I just asked you to draw a demand curve wherever. So if it looks like that, what's the level of profits for the firms? It's positive. So it's a positive profit if it's above it. So if you drew one like this, even without kind of getting into marginal revenue, marginal cost business, if it looks like that, then there'd be some economic profit. So in the long run, what do we know about economic profit in a competitive market? It'll be zero, right? The signal to enter, enter, enter. More firms will enter. Differed QQ says there's going to be more than 2 firms. He says it's not 2, and he didn't say that it wasn't 1, but let's just think that we're not allowing the monopoly anymore and there's positive profit. So it's going to be something greater than 2. How do we know that? It's staring you in the face. You can put this picture, these thoughts and assumptions that go along with this picture, and put it over here. And think about the long run where economic profits are how much? 0. So why do we know for sure that it's not 2?
2 makes a profit.
2 makes a profit, okay? I think there's more to it though. This is with 2, right? Everybody's with me that 1,000 is 2?
Yeah.
Right? So this is the representative firm. This is 2 firms, each producing 1,000 for a grand total of 2,000. And it's not going to be 2. It's going to be more than 2. What do we know about demand curves? You guys seem to draw the right shape. Jacob, what does this mean? Downward sloping. And so what's the end result here for this picture? What's the end result for this? This is the long run equilibrium. And what's going on here with the downward sloping demand and the average cost curve? They're barely touching. They're tangent to each other. If they weren't tangent, you'd have some sort of football region. If there's some sort of football region, then there's some amount of profit at that level. And if there was some amount of profit at that level, somebody would be doing it. So this is very intentional here that once we have a change in the market, you brought up maybe this drifts up a little bit, this comes down, maybe this gets a little flatter, but as competition shapes itself, we know that the end result will be that the representative firm will be earning 0 economic profit, which is depicted by the demand curve being just tangent to the average cost curve, which happens at 1 and only 1 point. What is that conclusion here? Can we be to the right?
No.
Could we be at 2? Why could it not be 2? It has to be the left because why, Bryce? Tyler, go ahead.
It has to be on the horizontal. It says that was on the horizontal, so the demand curve has to be going downwards.
If it was tangent here, what would be the shape of the demand curve?
Exactly flat.
It's exactly flat. So if it's a downward sloping demand curve, it has to be to the left. Maybe it's at 1.99, but it's somewhere to the left here. is where the number of firms is going to be in equilibrium. So we know that it's not 2 because the demand curve is going to be downward sloping, which means the tangent area is somewhere to the left of the quantity of 2 of 1,000 with there being 2 firms. It's going to be somewhere over there. It could be, it could be a little steeper, and it could be here, but we know for sure it can't be at the start of the horizontal portion. Okay, questions. Don't be bashful if you got questions on that. It's a little bit nitpicky with little kind of geeky, dorky details about econ in there, so it's not like earth-shattering if you don't totally get it, but I'd like you to get it, so don't be afraid to ask a question if you got one. Cool? All right, maybe not cool, but cool enough? Okay. All right, so that is chapter 6. So the odd problems are due Thursday before class, so we'll go over them Thursday. And today we start chapter 7. So, cities in a regional economy. So, the region is what we're kind of looking at today. So we think about downtown Kansas City, and downtown Kansas City has its official governmental lines, and then you've got a bunch of other cities that have evolved, right? All the Metropolitan, and of course then we have State Line Road, and some of these are in Missouri, some of these are in Kansas, and so we end up having this Kansas City metropolitan area, right? So the economic area is defined more so by the economic activity that's going on around Kansas City. We might refer to it as Kansas City, but it's the metropolitan service area, the MSA is what we're talking about. So that's kind of what we're getting into here in this chapter, is thinking about these regions and areas, and maybe cities within those regions of what would cause them to grow and shrink. Okay, so economic growth is defined as an increase in the utility level of a typical resident. How do we normally measure economic growth, like in macro class? How do we measure? GDP, right? Gross domestic product, so we can think about the country level, the state level. We can measure the GDP of the city of Ottawa, right? It's just the dollar value of all final goods and services that were sold within the city of Ottawa over the course of the year. So we can look at the gross domestic product of Ottawa. We're just measuring dollars and income, essentially. Now here, the textbook is taking a little twist here to say the utility level. What's utility? Happiness. So how do we connect happiness and dollars? I'm just going to spill the beans to you. There's no good way to really do that, and so we're going to use income again as a proxy for happiness, right? And so it kind of have to fall back on that a lot of times. Sometimes we can tease out some interesting things, like there's surveys on your level of happiness on a scale of 0 to 10, how happy are you? So there's different things that we do, but a common thing here is just to we want to acknowledge that we're really thinking about happiness, but we're going to use dollars to kind of help us measure that happiness. So it's like we say that it's not true, but then we're going to do it anyway because it's the easiest thing to measure, is in large part what happens. All right, so we've got these different aspects. Capital deepening, increasing human capital. So what was human capital? Carlos? Ideas. Innovation. What else? Somebody else add on? Human capital.
Skills in general.
Skills in general of the people. So you've got the person. It's kind of like you want to take a person and you have a job. It doesn't matter if they have a PhD in economics or a high school graduate. I need somebody to shovel the sidewalk, right? And so somebody can go out and there's work to be done, and you don't need a higher level of human capital to shovel the sidewalk, mow the lawn, wash the dishes. You go down the line. So low, no-skill jobs don't require a lot of human capital. And so then human capital starts to go up within certain units of labor. they can specialize in different things and have those skill levels. So that's the idea of increasing human capital is having our existing stock of people, the number of the population, and is there a way that we can enhance their human capital? It's not like we're forcing it down their throats and telling them, this is what I want you to do. Maybe we can have a system where they voluntarily seek and grope out what they think they're good at or what they want to do, right? In theory, that's our system. You guys are business majors. Some of the other people are chemistry majors, right? Or something else. And so we can allow human capital to grow organically by having a set of institutions that allows for voluntary exchange of growing human capital. My point with all that is that it doesn't have to be government controlled. It has to be this way. There's other ways to design it that's a little more private market, free market oriented. All right, so same thing with technology. How does technology progress? Technological progress. Well, it's kind of tied into human capital. So if we have those people with the opportunities to try to make changes, improve their lives, then we make things better and we see that growth. And then agglomeration is kind of the hot one for this class. Localization and urbanization economies, people clustering together. Are these spillover effects possible, given again how things have formed over time? All right, so we're going to kind of pick some of these off here as we go. And so the first question is, why do cities vary? So this is kind of interesting. This goes back to 2000, so this is a little old, right? 20 years old. But still, even back in 2000, 10 million in population. Number of urban areas with 10 million in population was 2. 10 million. Guess what those 2 were in the United States? New York, LA. New York and LA. Those are the 2 big metropolitan areas. New York is still the biggest. It's still around, I don't know, 19 million or so, 20 million probably by now. And then once we start to get into this range, 5 million to 10 million, only 4. Now again, this is back to 2000. What's the population of Kansas City?
It's like, I feel like it's 4 million.
Little strong.
2 million?
It's around closer to 2. Somewhere between 2 and 3, I think. I haven't looked at it for a little while, but around the 2 range. So we're not even to that. If we think KC's the big city, and Kansas City is a decent regional city, right? But that's kind of interesting. We're in this 43 range. And then once you get 100,000 to 1 million, again, Lawrence being the big city isn't even quite 100, or Kaylin thought maybe it was around 90 to 100 or so. So we're scratching the surface of that. And then we've got the less than 100,000. Okay. So, why do we see things evolve into 18 million, and it doesn't happen very often, versus, these other ones? Okay, so we've got some competing things going on in terms of our happiness that we're trying to measure here. So, an increase in employment generates some agglomeration that we've looked at earlier that give us happiness. So agglomeration economies in production and agglomeration economies in consumption. So we talked about maybe being able to go to the opera yesterday in our chapter 6 material. The big city has more amenities, more things, and so we end up getting some agglomeration there that can help us on our utility function. And then in production can help with some of our wages and stuff going up. But then the big city comes with some negatives too. And so if we think about the things that don't make us so happy, we either live outside the town and we have commuting, or we live in the town and we have higher cost of living, right? So that's kind of the trade-off that people need to think about. Historically, disease has plagued the big cities. I think Glazer has touched on that in the Triumph book a little bit. But when you were close to each other, who kind of got hit the worst with this pandemic? New York. Who was the biggest city in the United States? New York, right? So even today, having people piled up on top of each other, if there's a communicable disease, that could cause some negative effects in a bigger way in the bigger cities. All right, and then pollution. Although Glazer pushed back on that, saying if we have lots of pedestrian people and people using the subway, that his study found that there might be actually less pollution in a really big city. But some of the other cities, Chicago, we start going down and you're kind of urban sprawl and you're driving to and from work, pollution could be a negative part on that. All right, so that's kind of the tug and pull here of some benefits and costs. So let's try to build a little model out of this. So we've got some commuting costs, some wage. So we start with our workforce. And we've got different cities is what we're imagining here. So we've got 1 million, 2 million, 4 million. As I get into the bigger city, agglomeration and other impacts start to raise the wage. Labor income starts to go up. Commuting cost. And our utilities. So where is that number coming from on happiness? Commute time increases with city size. Congestion is what we're thinking of, the amount of time it takes to get there. And that takes away from our leisure time. So we wanted to come up with something, being able to do what I want to do on my own time, whether that's binging Netflix or fishing or doing other things. So we're going to lump work and leisure, kind of the labor-leisure trade-off. All right, so then we've got these potential different utilities here, but they're measured in dollars again. So we call that indirect utility through our income. And so we're taking like an 8-hour shift. 8 times 8 is 64. 8 times 10 is 80. 8 times 11 is 88. So that's the idea with that column. And then the commuting cost is just ramping up by some factor here as we get into the bigger city. Okay, so that's kind of the setup of the factors. Any questions or comments there? So there's our utility function. Exhibits those diminishing returns like we did before with utility. So as the city, now here we've got workers per city in the millions. And so over some range, from 1 to 2, why is it going up?
We're growing.
We're growing.
New firms.
So it's growing, so why is the utility going up? Because we're measuring from S to M, we go from 59 to 70 units.
There's the wages going up.
Wages are going up, so that was the big factor, right? So as the city starts to grow and there's agglomeration, we got wages going up.
Consumption.
And consumption, is there starting to be congestion?
Not quite.
Not too much yet, right? And so that's the whole point here, is that then once we get to bigger levels, we're going to have some of those, oops, I kind of didn't mean to do that. Thought there was one more flip. So as we start to get bigger and bigger though, those congestion costs are increasingly getting burdensome. The traffic, it used to take 20 minutes to get to work, now it takes 45 minutes or an hour to get to work. Okay, so what is our locational equilibrium? So within a city, we've got the commute cost and the land rent. So you want cheap housing, live away, but then you got to drive. So a lot of people in Ottawa do that, right? They're commuting. In our case, it's not quite there's some other historical stuff, but Dr. DeWald, Mary Lou lives 50 minutes away, about 45 maybe. And Professor Wagner lives about 50 minutes away in Lacine. Now Lacine is even a smaller town than Ottawa, so it is actually true that housing prices are a little bit cheaper. She's got a very beautiful house on kind of a big acreage type of thing, and it's pretty cheap. But Lacine County is one of the poorest counties in all of Kansas. And so that's the trade-off, right? She gets to have a house, and again, there's always historical stuff of why she was there in the first place, but you know, for her to get that same house closer to Ottawa, or let alone Kansas City, would be substantially higher. Okay, so commute distance, 0, 5, 10. So based off that commute, we've got a commuting cost going on per unit, and we've got some land rent and labor income, so we'll kind of pick these apart as we go. So everyone owns equal shares of property, like a corporation. So this is just part of the model. Equal shares of land rent is the $15 for the land rent. Oh, thought there was one more of my bugs here. So the thing that we're getting to that we'll do graphically is that with these trade-offs, we'll have combinations that equalize the happiness, right? There'll be some number out there as this gets higher, one gets better, one gets worse, right? With the land rent here, and so those are the trade-offs that we're tugging at. So, suppose we've got a region with 6 million workers. So we've got one with 6 cities, so there'd be kind of 6 cities, all with 1 million workers. 3 cities with 2, 2 cities with 3. So we kind of imagine there being 3 possible states of nature with the cities. So, can cities be too large? So can cities be too large? What is the problem with this particular city that's currently at 3 million population with the workers? Point L is not optimal in what way?
It doesn't have like the road infrastructure already built in to support that.
I want to think more about the model here. That might be some of the realities that could cause a city to do that. But here I just want to kind of look at the model of what's wrong with L versus other sizes. What's wrong with the 3 million? What makes it, the author's kind of saying, this city might be too large. Why is 3 million bad, I guess?
Lower utility.
So lower utility than M, right? So that's all we're pointing out first, is just to say, hey, this city, in some ways, the optimal utility maximizing city size would actually be 2 million. So, you know, why is it here? Well, what happens if the city grows more? What happens to the utility per person if they move towards point Z? Utility goes down, so there's not much incentive for that to go that direction. And if people leave the city, it would go up, right? So is there incentive for it to switch from one city to another? So remember, in our thought experiment, we had 2 cities of 3 million in this region of 6. So we've got a region of 6. Imagine we've got 2 cities at 3 million each. So I want to make myself better off. I'm this person. I'm going to leave this city. Do you have incentive to go to the other city of 3 million? No, because when you add there, you're going to make it worse off than what you were before. Now, the other people, the city you left, they're like, bye-bye, right? Because all the people remaining in this city are higher levels of utility. So now we have 1 person more to the right and 1 person less here in the 2 cities. What's the incentive for somebody in that bigger city to do? Go back. When they go back, this city's happy because now they're getting happier. This city just increased, we're back to L. So we're telling a dynamic story with this. Like what would be the incentives over time? This is a Nash equilibrium, given those circumstances, right? No person would want to choose to leave because it's going to make them worse off. Okay, so that's what the author's getting at here. Cities may be too large. Like in theory, we'd say 2 million would be the right number, but they can't get there because we're in a Nash equilibrium at 3. Nobody has incentive to actually move. Questions or comments there? All right. So this is, I got this little reminder here. This is a self-correcting. So changes in population are self-correcting. One person leaves, they go back. It's going to correct, self-correcting in the form of getting back to that L equilibrium. Okay, now, cities are not too small though. So now let's go to our hypothetical 6 cities of 1 million each. 6 cities of 1 million each. They're on the upward sloping part of the utility curve at point S. Would they want to move to a neighboring city? Yes. So as they leave here, this city starts to shrink, but they're gaining population in the other city. And so what happens with this city? It's Detroit. Yeah, bye-bye. No, it's a small rural Kansas city, right? Population 13. There's just Granny here. It used to be a population of 3,000. Then the industry left the town, right? And so away it goes. So we have a shrinking city. So this ends up being a self-reinforcing effect. As people leave, it starts to go. And so this is not a Nash equilibrium at point S. They're going to continue to go until they get to M. And so at M, we've got 3 cities with the 2 million, if it evolved that way to begin with. Okay, questions or comments? Okay, so give this a read. All right, pretty much what we just covered. So L is stable. So what does this thing look over time? So I kind of broke 3 different things up here. So utility per worker, we got small localization. Is it possible for a small city to be at S? Is that a stable equilibrium? Yes. So what we're starting to uncover here is that a city can be on the downward slope of this for whatever reason, and it's going to be stable. There's not going to be incentive for migration between other cities. And so what if we have a medium city currently at level M? That's fine, that's stable. What if we have a big city, the large urbanization economy is going on? That's fine. And then here's the big picture. Where are we going to live? The small city, the medium city, or the big city? Ultimately, it's all going to equalize. So if there was opportunities to go to the big city, then they would. They would leave, and this one would go up, this one would go down. And so now we can think of different size cities, not all just homogeneous of the 6 $1 million cities, 3 2 million, or 2 3 million. They could be different sizes. We're going to get the same concept going on with the equalization of happiness through migration. All right, I think we're about ready for a problem. Yeah, we're going to save this for Thursday, so let's do a problem here. So we're in chapter 7. All right, number 2, I think is the one we wanted to do. Number 2, new cities. A regional economy has 11 million workers and an urban city utility curve of 15 plus 12n minus n squared, where n is the number of workers in millions. Initially, all 11 million workers are in a single city. Suppose the regional government establishes a new city with 1 million workers, leaving 10 million workers in the old city. Predict the new equilibrium distribution of the population between the two cities and illustrate. So you're going to be using that model we just went over. Talk to your neighbors, figure it out. everybody quiet down. Too much chatter in here. Did I forget to tell you you can pop it in here? Okay, that looks like a good place to dig in.
I'm just trying to.
For this one, it might be helpful to do the math right away too. And you can draw a generic picture, but do the math first. Okay, so you plug it in. Yeah, I mean, that's what you want to do. Yeah, yeah. You can pull out your calculator, your phone, and use it as a calculator if you want today. Put it on airplane mode if you don't have a calculator handy. What'd you get for your numbers here?
So far, 6 miles.
Okay.
So it should actually happen. I mean, I have that, but I will.
Well, we need exact numbers though. So did you calculate it at 10? Okay. And 11? Okay. And the same for 1. Okay. So yeah, now once you've got this guy sitting on this side, now predict what's going to happen over time. Well, do the math. Like you need 1 million people adding to one and leaving the other. Where's the new equilibrium? You need to solve for that. So yeah, so you got the right idea, 26, 26. And now the next part of the story is what's going to happen with migration. What are these people going to do? They're going to go that way, yeah. So they go that way, their utility goes up, and what happens to that utility? Which way is the population going? Yeah. So they're going to go down. So they're going to meet somewhere in the middle. So you can kind of do plug and chug is one way to do it. Yeah. Yeah, but this 10, you're on the wrong side of the utility line. So did you do 11? Do 11. Once you do 11, then you're going to see, and you got to you do have to kind of keep your scales right. So remember, 11 is right here. Not with this. This one you gotta. Well, you're trying to solve for where they'll be equalized. So you'd be solving for n. Yeah. Right. But the problem is we only got one equation. I think most of you have the right track here. So you'd want to calculate the utility at 10, the utility at 1, the utility at 11. And then the small town is on the downward slope of the utility curve, so they're going to migrate to the big town. But remember, as soon as they start leaving, then the utility goes up for them, but down for the other. All right, class dismissed. Hopefully you got your answer. If you don't, that's your homework problem. Come back with that one answered.